Welcome to another Dragon Firesides. Today I have a special guest, Lisa Poole, Dr. Lisa Poole. We met on Facebook, and I always have my guests introduce themselves because I don't ever want to be the person that leaves something out. So tell me your origin story, Lisa.
Okay, so I had a neck injury many, many, many years ago, and I was given the choice between drugs or something else, and I took the drugs and I vomited for 5 hours,
Oh
and
wow.
I was like, "How is this fixing my problem?" And so that is a very condensed version of how I arrived at acupuncture. But I'd always been interested in Asian medicine from a child when I would see it done on the news every once in a while. In Colorado, it was around even when I was a kid, and I thought it was super cool. And I had my first acupuncture treatment, and then I decided that maybe this is something I wanted to pursue. I was really fascinated by it. And it was a really life altering experience, as it is for a lot of people. And that led me to moving to Portland, and I went to OCOM, and I've been a licensed practitioner now for 18 years. Most of that time I've been in McMinnville, Oregon, and I am now only working part time and probably on my way to not being an active provider pretty soon. So it's been a really big journey for me, but I just love this medicine very much and still dedicated to it. Regardless of how many hours I am a practitioner, this medicine is beautiful. So that's how I kind of arrived here.
Awesome. Awesome. So you're moving out of practice. Are you retiring or are you moving into the next chapter? Whatever
Um,
that looks like.
for me, this has never paid the bills, and I've been living just below or just above poverty for ever and ever and ever. And I just need stability, and I need health insurance. And I'm a single parent and have been for a long time. And so for me, it was really about transitioning out. I also just need a break. I think I'm a little bit burned out. And so the whole pandemic thing made me realize how much I actually do really enjoy working from home. And I needed that in my next kind of career. And because of this profession, I don't have any savings and I don't have any retirement and I don't have anything. And so at 50, I'm starting over. So um, I filed for, we can get into this in a minute, but I have filed for an adversarial proceeding against my student loans to get my federal loans removed. And I just kind of hit the restart button on everything. And now I'm working as a project manager, kind of returning back to my business career, which is what I did prior to becoming an acupuncturist. That's in the finance world. So I just decided to get my MBA in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm back in the business world. And I'm
Yeah.
really loving it. And it's actually helped me fall back in love with acupuncture because my, days in the clinic right now are much more enjoyable. I see about 15 people a week and that's it. And that's sustainable for me and really nice. And so it's a double-edged sword. I really miss it. I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do and I love it and I feel like it's such an important part, but I also need to take care of me and my family. So at 50, I'm kind of ran out of runway. So now I have to participate in the other part of the world and I don't have a partner to, make up the difference. So I am the partner.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish, this was a less common story, I talk to
Mhm.
people literally every day that are in your situation and that have had similar experiences, and, those are the kinds of things that I hope to address because I do think
Right.
that there are solutions to these problems, but there are systemic problems that need to be addressed. There's
Absolutely.
what's going on with the school closures is
Yep.
happening, I think how we met, is it right that you have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that addresses student loan forgiveness for practitioners?
Yeah. And so, I mean, the thing is that I have a hot take, which is that I am actually really super excited to see this conversation about caps happening for how much you can borrow, because that conversation leads into how much we've been overcharged. And I'm not against the schools. Some of them I am, because some of them did not do our profession well. And that's a whole separate discussion. But there are several schools that were really attempting to do things the right way and do it really well. It's just that the program cost about 5 times more than it should have. And so there it's bringing about this discussion that we have to figure out some way to bring the cost of education into alignment. And it just happens to be that, OCOM, for example, was the second worst school in the United States for fraud based on this debt to income. And NCNM is number one. And if you look at the overwhelming, list of 3,200 schools in the United States, the overwhelming amount of percentage-wise of acupuncture schools that hit the top 100, it's basically everyone. And so there's a national conversation that needs to happen about the cost of education. We've been defunding education for the last 40 years. That is to our society's detriment. So there's that. And then we have the very real problem with even within our profession. Then we took that and we really went for it. You have things like legislation like in 2005 and 2006 where Congress decided to get rid of the guardrails of bankruptcy for student loans. And so you just look at the follow the money, and literally the next year after that you see tuitions in all sorts of schools double or triple. And because they knew the guardrails were off, and so they just were like, oh, students won't ever be able to come back after us about this. And so they just raised the tuition. And it's not just within our profession. So I wish to also make that very clear. This is many, many, many schools, thousands of schools throughout the United States who participated in this and still are. And so there's all these factors that kind of go into that. What's happening specifically for us is that we have a very solid claim for bar's defense because honestly, most of the schools and acupuncture schools are being fraudulent by just how much they're charging in tuition, if nothing else, because they're over promising what can happen in our profession, and we are still averaging $25,000 to $40,000 average salary, and now they're wanting to charge 150 plus for tuition. That's insane. And it never should have cost more than 25,000. I know a lot of people say, well, that's not realistic. It isn't realistic, and I totally get that. But if the schools did not participate in helping us obtain careers and get us into the hospitals and really get us in the door on those things, it's just not a working model. So we have to kind of figure out a new path forward. And we do have, a few schools that are trying to do that, where they're trying to bring costs down, but it is at a cost to our profession. And so we are really in a we can't win situation at the moment. I don't think it's going to stay there. I think it's going to require some significant revolution that's going to have to happen within our profession and also within our culture in America, which is under assault as well. So, every time we talk about this, I think it's really important to recognize the societal collapse that's happening and then also the accountability that needs to happen with our profession, and both have to happen. And it's not all just up to us, but it really is all of the above. And we can't talk about one without also really acknowledging the other. And I think that's where sometimes people get lost in the anger about it, is that we really actually just need to sit down and problem solve how we're going to help each other continue forward.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. I think that, you know, the college education, graduate studies, doctorate studies, across the board, the price of tuition, regardless of what you're studying, has inflated to a point that is just egregious. I do remember when I was in school, I went to school for acupuncture in 2005 into 2005, and I was in school. I graduated in 2009, and during my tenure there, they raised the tuition for the whole program by something like twenty
Mhm.
thousand dollars. I think it was $45,000, and then they raised it to 64,000 or something like that. And they were basing the justification of that on basically the University of Texas
Right.
tuition, and equating them as the same thing. Which, not sure how you do that, but I think that, inside of all of this conversation, like, the cost of tuition is its own thing. The quality of the education is
Yep.
another thing.
Yep.
The consistency across states is another thing.
Yes.
Scope of practice and credentialing is another thing. And then,
Yes.
running, growing a business. Like, I think that at minimum, you have somebody going to school to be a teacher or a doctor or some profession where you can get a salaried position at a company. That's one thing. Getting a six-figure student loan debt for something where their jobs exist and you can get them, that's one thing. But for acupuncturists, like, we're not
Yep.
credentialed in a way that we can work at most hospitals, right? And we're
Right.
not treated as something that has the same efficacy as Western medicine, allopathic medicine, or something like that. And so we have this layered compound problem that needs to be navigated. And I don't really
Yep.
know where we jump in. I always focus on the business side of things because I think that it is possible to grow a practice without relying on insurance, without relying on um, just the other path, the non-entrepreneurial path.
Sure.
But where you're coming from, I think, is so important to talk about. People need to know what they're signing up for. People know
Yep.
need to know what the systemic inherent problems are um, within our community and our profession are. And I appreciate that you're committed to kind of shining the light on that.
Well, and
Um,
at the moment, it is pretty much for 90% of people who are going to go to school. If they move forward with acupuncture school within the last 20 years, you are signing up for indentured servitude unless you have a partner, unless you have some kind of money that is donated or given to you. So maybe an inheritance or some other way. It's not, there's no acupuncture program by itself with few exception in which you could pay for it just from the acupuncture income. And we have researched that forwards and backwards. We've talked to so many people, and it's just super abundantly clear that this is not a profession in which you can pay back the loans based on the profession itself. There has to be other factors that come in. So if you're able to pay for your education as you go, then you'll be fine. But most people are wanting to come into this profession as a means to have a profession in which to then make it, other income. I also think that there's this, idea that if you make six figures, you'll be fine. I've made six figures the whole time. I'll walk away with 40 to 45,000, and I run a very tight ship. And my best year, I made, $190,000, and I walked away with 55. And again, run a very tight ship. I've, crunched numbers forwards and backwards. I'm a finance girly. Like, this is what I do. That's just the reality of taxes and expenses. And we've seen that just balloon. And if you are in a state where there's heavy insurance, you're kind of stuck. It's very, very difficult to have a cash practice in the state of Oregon, for example. And there are other states like that where there's just a lot of heavy insurance coverage. And that has been a blessing and a curse, both, because then you can't negotiate your prices to go up when costs go up. And there's other factors like that that just keep, piling in. And I think, like you said, there's just not a continuity of problems between the states. There's not a continuity of benefits either. It's like all of that is kind of a problem. I will say that while I, do support the early OCOM message and what they were trying to do, I will say 100% of all acupuncture schools have one thing that very much lays at all of their feet, and they're 100% accountable for, which is taking absolute zero action on creating career pathways for us within the hospitals, within medical clinics, and that, is 100% a school's, should be part of a school's mandate to be doing that. And I am even more critical of that since I went to CSU, Colorado State University, for my MBA. It doesn't take much, but it definitely takes a combined effort. But I'm telling you, I got my job right now because of career outreach. There were so many options. I understand it's a bigger school, but every school that's successful and doing well out there all have this, connection with leaders in the community and companies within the community and really creating that pipeline. And 0% of any acupuncture school has done any of that. So I do feel like we want to talk about the way the schools are victims, and we also want to talk about where schools really had a colossal failure. And this is one area, and they're still not doing anything. And it's really upsetting for me to see that, because that has a direct impact on your ability to pay back your student loans. And frankly, I don't want anybody to have a a good case for borrower's defense, but 100% of all acupuncture students with student loans do have a case for borrower's defense. They have a case to have their loans canceled. And this is like that big, it just comes back to this. It's not a viable career in which you can walk out and have a salary. You have to have the finances to be able to pay for the education, and then also to have several years where you're not going to make money, because that is normal business. Normal business, it's 3 to 5 years to be at a steady profit. So how are you paying for your life while you're creating that? And again, if you have a spouse, it's much more possible. If you have supportive family who are willing to buy in, they're all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of people who don't have any of that. So I want to see a profession in which a woman like myself could make this a career and make it be something that is not the worst financial decision I've ever made in my entire life, and has kept me from any level of success and caused me nothing but sleepless nights for the last 18 years. I would like it to make something where it would be something that is successful. We talk about balance in, Chinese medicine all the time. Well, this is so out of balance on so many levels that it's destroying the medicine, or destroying the opportunity for the medicine to be what it has the power to be, which is a very, very integral part of the healing process for people, and the healing, and across many levels. Like, how are we not on the surgery wards? Why are we not in, chronic pain management clinics? Like, this is so illogical to me. I don't understand. And so I've fought for that, but again, I'm often a lone voice out there for wanting to create that. So there's some people who want to kind of come together and talk about it, and I think it's great, but it really takes the schools to really foster that, and they're just still not doing it.
Yeah. Oh man. This is
Sorry.
no, this is sobriety is required for this conversation. I think we got to air it out. We need to talk about our feelings, but we also need to, have logistical conversations about how to
Mhm.
start chipping away at this. Um,
Yep.
and so, usually I try to find the silver lining in these conversations and offer a little bit of hope, in them. But I think before we go there, let's for the people that are feeling what you're feeling and that are in a situation where they can't pay their bills, they are considering part-time income or other income outside of acupuncture altogether. They're feeling like hopeless and wanting to give up, and like this profession that they love so much has just let them down, disappointed them, signed them up for failure, all this kind of stuff. Let's start with one thing. So you said that every acupuncturist has a case for the borrower's defense.
Yep.
Can you lay out the case so that anybody that's interested in pursuing that, potentially, was armed with what they would need to start thinking about it and exploring it?
Yes, it is complicated legally on what I am allowed and not allowed to say.
Yeah, sure.
And so, what I would say that the general argument is, there was a study done that really showed the debt to income ratios for 3,200 schools in the United States. And I think it's really important to have everybody understand that many of our top acupuncture schools are at the top of that list, including my school, OCOM, and whatnot. And that really is probably the largest foundational aspect of it, is that it is so out of whack. So, for example, NUNM is at 700 and some odd percent of debt to income ratio, and OCOM was at like around 650. So I may not have those numbers exactly right, but honestly, any school that's above 100% is now borderline into the kind of fraudulent level of how much they're charging. So that just really shows exactly how out of whack it is. And that is a very like dominating factor that kind of goes into this, is just how much the schools have been overcharging for what it is that you can really get out of the program. And other things to look at are, there are some schools that had, some sex trafficking going on.
Oh
There are
my
other
god.
schools that had other legal cases that are going on. There's a lot that's been uncovered, that's been, disappointing. And there's just other schools that are a little bit more in the middle of the pack. They maybe didn't overcharge as much, but they're still at 400 to 500% of where it needs to be. And so that's alarming. And we do see that again across the board, that has been rising and an issue for many professions. It just happens to be that naturopaths and acupuncturists, you ask any student loan lawyer who is the worst hit by the student loan debacle, and 100% of them will say naturopaths and acupuncturists because of that issue. So that's really the primary one. And then within that, there's different issues that happened at different schools. So there's a spectrum there. And it's really about, outlining that and really showing. And 100% of all schools are still over-promising for what can be delivered. And so I'm still hoping that the law is going to go into effect that's going to require schools to disclose. And one of the schools is claiming that they are now doing that. And I read what they wrote, and I don't really know how they think that qualifies as a disclaimer about that, but supposedly they feel like what they've said legally meets the requirements, but it's still not being specific enough about the fact that most acupuncturists are still, 40 to 50 grand a year. That's their take home, and that doesn't justify the tuition that they're being charged. So I would really like to see, as a society, so this is going to step away from acupuncture for a minute, but I'd really like to see more of the idea that what we're doing is as a trade, because I don't really see what teachers and doctors and acupuncturists and chiropractors, we're all tradespeople. And I feel like maybe as we can start talking about it, it's like this is a skill that is necessary within society. We think of that with electricians and plumbers. And yes, electricians and plumbers are really, integral to how we survive and how we function in our world. But I would also really like to see that conversation happen with medicine and education and a couple other areas as well. And I feel like if we maybe started turning the conversation towards that on a national level, I do think that would be helpful. And that is something I actually used in my Barrow's defense case as well, really talking about how, that we're being charged for a level of salary that we're not receiving, but also not the schools themselves not addressing the fact that we are tradespeople, we're learning a skill, and there's a certain price that should go along with that. And so there's no training, there's no interning, and we're not being paid to learn on the job, which happens for many other professions, including teachers and medical doctors, and we don't have that. So kind of talking about the career limitations, talking about the fact that we don't have those opportunities within our profession to do that is also a detriment. So those are some of the things that you can use in Barrow's defense. We have an entire group, like I said, and then we have files in there that kind of really go through what a Barrow's defense case is. Some people have chosen to hire student loan lawyers to help them write their case. At the moment, there's been a pause put on all Barrow's defense. So the Sweet versus Cardona case is still out there, but those are from people from a long time ago and will not include most of the people who've applied for Barrow's defense for acupuncturists. Most of us applied in 2022 and more current, and so that court case does not impact us. And so I still think that people should apply as long as the application is there, but they just also have to know that it's a giant unknown what's going to happen with the Barrow's defense applications for the long haul.
Mhm. Okay. So one of the things that you have mentioned a couple of times now is that, socially as a society, we need to make some new agreements in terms of how we treat these modalities, and the kind of training that we have associated with them, the kinds of spaces that you're allowed to occupy, um, being successful, what role it should actually fill that is pragmatic in a way that people can make a living, people understand what they're signing up for, the kind of ethics of how you direct people and advise people related to these professions is something that needs to be addressed. Before we started the podcast, you had mentioned to me that you have gotten into some advocacy or legislation related to these kinds of things. Can you tell me your experience with that and kind of what you, from your perspective, think needs to happen logistically
Sure.
in terms of all that?
The the two areas I've really been focusing on is I do have a student loan reform bill that I have tried to get passed for the last 18 years. So that's one piece of legislation. I've made it to the, more virtually made it to the Capitol with it twice. And so our Senator Wyden here has tried to get it co-sponsored, and he has not been able to do that. So I continue to work on that because the student loan issue is, such a major portion of this whole conversation of why we're struggling so much. So I continue to work on that, which is why I try to stay on the front lines of like what is or is not going on with student loans and the legislation around it, which right now is a hot mess. And then here locally in Oregon, trying to do whatever we can to really get insurance companies to come to the table, because one of the other things that we suffer from is that we're very low in numbers and we're not part of a hospital system. And so we don't have the capability to come to the table to force them to pay us a reasonable amount, because they don't care if Lisa Poole's on their panel. I'm just a lone fry out there, and we're all, for the most part, pretty lone fries. Like, even if we're part of a small clinic and maybe there's two or three providers, they still don't care. They sometimes will play ball if you're the only provider in like a 50-mile radius, which can definitely happen in some states. And so sometimes they're more willing to bring it up, but most of the time, most insurance companies, they just thumb their nose at us and say, too bad, so sad. There's, 10 more of you. We don't care. And so one of the things that we've been really trying to do, and I'm very proud of the Oregon Acupuncture Association, and their efforts. It's been a struggle, no lie, but they're really trying to work at all the kind of different intersections of our scope of practice, which unfortunately we just really lost on that big time. They've really been trying to see, like, what can we do to bring insurance companies to the table to have a conversation about our compensation and have it bring it more into alignment with cost of doing business. And then one of the things I was really working on, which was to force the hand of insurance companies to even offer acupuncture coverage, is I sat on the Essential Benefits Committee for the state of Oregon, and through that argued and made a proposal to add acupuncture as an essential benefit for the state of Oregon, and I was successful to get that passed, which was great. As happens, you get something passed, and then somebody's going to find some way to, there was a backlash from that. So what some insurance companies did is decide they were maybe offering 20 acupuncture visits a year, but the new state minimum was 12, so they would lower the limit down to 12 because they might have 50 plans that they offered, but maybe they only had 10 plans that offered acupuncture. And so they would give 20 at that. But now they have to offer acupuncture on most of the other plans. So they then lowered everybody to a minimum. Um, I still stand by the decision to create that minimum because I do feel like it lays the ground the just lays the road down for understanding that acupuncture is a very necessary and a very professional and appropriate medical treatment for a wide assortment of issues. And we are, definitely struggling to make those inroads. But I do feel like in Oregon and Washington, for sure, Washington's been doing a fantastic job on having that conversation, and so is Colorado, on really laying the groundwork for how important this medicine is to avoiding opiates and helping people with, their day-to-day lives and being able to go to work and all of that. So there's a lot of different things in the work. There's also obviously on the ACA side, they're really trying to get acupuncture included in Medicare, and I know that's hotly contested idea. And I will say no opinion one way or the other, but those are just things that are going on. And I've chosen not to participate in that particular fight. I've been really, in the past, just more focused in on what we could do here in Oregon. But I think that those things are you know, again, it's more of laying the fabric down and saying that, like, we should be woven into the fabric of America as part of our healthcare system. And it's not perfect in how we're doing it, but that's one of the things that I think we're trying to make an argument for. And we are seeing, this is, if you want to get down to positives, one of the most positive things I'm seeing is that because of all that effort to really show, like, yes, we are part of the medical community, our patients, our demand, I have never seen it so high. And patients are getting increasingly angry over the lack of access to us and the lack of coverage of acupuncture. And there's a lot of people who are very angry about, most of the Medicare Advantage programs are dropping acupuncture, and they're frustrated that they're being told that acupuncture is covered through Medicare, and it turns out it's not really covered. All those kinds of things are happening. There is a growing frustration from the community at large about wanting to have acupuncture and being frustrated over lack of access and what that looks like. So I do feel like that's also helping push some of this legislation forward. It's not always pretty, but that's happening. And I think that's awesome. It's really
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Some of my clients have been talking to me about new changes in VA benefits that are
Hmm.
covering acupuncture. I have another client on the East Coast that they just changed the payouts for acupuncturists, specifically for healthcare programs for the municipal workers. So, teachers and the like can get a certain number of treatments per year, and it's all covered. So, there's always fluctuations in that. All obviously, I think getting involved with the healthcare system, with the health insurance system, is a mixed bag. It's always a mixed bag.
Yep.
Keeping up with the changes in coding and coverage and all the things could be a full-time job, and
Absolutely. And most
that's
acupuncturists who are doing well, who are financially doing well, are typically speaking in states where there's a lot less insurance coverage because people have the expectation that they're going to have to pay out of pocket. And so, here in the state of Oregon, I don't know how it is in other places, but my premium every month is $600, and I had a $7,200 deductible. And so I really wanted my acupuncturist or my chiropractor or whomever I'm seeing to take my insurance, because even though I had that large deductible, unfortunately, sometimes I meet that deductible and need that coverage. And so, and even if you're working for your employer, I mean, you're still paying to have that insurance, there. And if you're paying to have it, like, of course, you want to be able to use it. And it makes sense why it's there, but it does come with those limitations, like you said. And so I do feel like when we hear testimonials from acupuncturists doing well, it's generally speaking in states where there's just not a lot of coverage in general for health insurance. And so people know that they just have the expectation that they're going to have to pay out of pocket for whatever it is that they need. And I do think it's a little bit of the wild, wild west right now in healthcare. And so we see a lot of people who are not going to be renewing for any insurance next year, and they're telling me, they're like, well, great. If I don't have to pay $600 a month in premium, then I can actually come see you and get the health care that I need anyway.
yeah.
Um, which is good and bad because they don't have coverage in case something really catastrophic goes on. But I do feel like there is momentum with the public to really see change and reform within healthcare. And I think if we are smart about how we come together and have conversations about how things have not gone well, how they are currently not going well, but also highlight how it could go well and make sure that we are part of that conversation for reform as it happens in the next 10 to 20 years, I think that acupuncture can be right in there, solid in the mix with everybody else, and be part of the reform that is on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think things are changing. Markets are always driven by the consumers, right? What people
Yep.
want is what they're going to get, and the market is going to adapt in response to that. You're already seeing, unfortunately, it's not necessarily involving acupuncturists, but you're seeing, weekend seminars being, 300-hour seminars, and then doctors can offer acupuncture, or, PTs that offer dry needling or something like that. And it's happening. The dissemination of acupuncture to broader scope of practitioners is happening because of the demand for it. And if we're not a part of the conversation, it means the stewards of that are not
Yep.
necessarily as informed. Um,
Exactly.
and some of them may even see it as something that is in competition to the type of medicine that they went to school for and they practice. So,
Yep.
what are you going to get out of that? So obviously, we need to be at the table.
Yes.
And yeah, so if somebody wanted to get involved in some kind of a way and, make a ripple into, the pond that is this, what do you think uh, they should put their attention on, or what could they do on the local level to start shifting the tide in some kind of way?
one of the most difficult parts for me is that, and I can be both a linear thinker and an artist. And so I think that helps me a lot. But one of the most frustrating things I see is all the infighting that's going on within acupuncture community and the lack of involvement in getting together to work as a group towards some, because even if you don't necessarily always agree on the direction that your group might be taking within your state, right? I haven't always agreed with the Oregon Acupuncture Association, but that's okay. I believe that they are doing their level best to, you know, get a seat at the table and whatnot. But even in this state where we have what I would consider to be a fairly decent association, there's just no money, there's nobody has any time, and nobody's showing up for it. And I think that if we really want to see change, we really need people in all the different states to figure out some way to come together. Yes, it's going to require money. Yes, it's going to require time. It's going to require conversation. It also requires having hard conversations with our patients. Because the thing is that this change is not going to come as a result of acupuncturists. I mean, pretty much. It what we do, our conversations with our patients is how we laid the groundwork for that. How we behave professionally, yes, all of those things matter, but the true impetus, the true power behind any change for us is going to come through our patients. And so what we really want to do is continue to have those hard conversations about what it is that we're offering for them, and light the fire underneath them and show them how they can support our voices when we're trying to work on legislation. And I do think that that's one thing I see that is successful here in Oregon is a lot of us providers will say, hey, we've got this bill coming up. And we do have patients who will then also write in letters, because one of the problems that we're having is that when we show up and it's just us, people are like, well, of course you want that because you're going to financially benefit from that. And it's like, well, right, because we have bills to pay. And if we don't have this minimum standard of financial success, like we're going to have to close our clinic and then we won't be there. So yes, we do have a financial stake, and it's okay that we do. We're not trying to be millionaires in that moment. We're trying to have a sustainable business. Um, but what really matters to most legislators is how is that impacting the greater public? And they want to hear from the public. And if they're not hearing from the public, they will go with what whomever it is pays them the most to have the right opinion in that moment. And the way to override that is if we create enough public outcry. So there are several acupuncturists who are now getting on TikTok, they're on YouTube, people like you doing this podcasting. This is where it's at, is to create that connection. And it may not even be necessarily your patient, right? Because everybody you look around is a potential patient, and everybody you look around has a medical thing. So, what are we doing in our everyday lives to show up for that, to have a conversation, and to put it out there and build momentum behind this that then gets people impassionate enough to say something? And when I would show people the numbers on what's going on for us, they would show up. And so, community is not just about how the infighting that might be having with us as acupuncturists, but it's also like recognizing that we have to make those connections with other providers. We have to make those other connections with patients at large and really start bringing it together. I mean, we have to do that across all things right now in the United States. We're struggling to operate as a community. The best way that we can combat that is if we start acting like the community. And it starts small, right? It starts in maybe even just this little local community I have, or maybe it's in our state association or whatever that is. But that is the best way to combat this, is to really figure out where our common areas are, how we can unite, what kind of messaging can we come together, and what does that look like, and develop a plan and then execute it. And I've taken a step back at the moment because I am working almost 7 days a week right now to make ends meet. And I think, unfortunately, there's several people like me at the moment. But any little things that you can do, I'm still talking with my patients. I'm still, if I get a message from OAA, hey, there's this thing, like, boom, I send it out to my patients, like, boom, here's a way you can help me maintain having access so you can have access to me. How we behave in our practices every day also speaks volumes about who we are as professionals. It's all of these things that we're doing every day, from the really like micro, moments that we have. all up to the macro are all of these things are really important, but it all comes down to coming together as a community. And we're struggling, and we have been struggling, unfortunately, for quite some time. But this is why I'm really excited to see people like you doing what you're doing. And I'm excited to see what some other providers are doing in terms of their advocacy on TikTok. And everybody's doing it in their own way, right? But that's what it takes, is to show the power of medicine. My colleague, Brian Crawford, is here in town with me. He has a really great, huge presence on TikTok. I'm super proud of him. He's doing great work. It all looks different, but man, it's really changing the conversation about where acupuncture fits within the greater medical model, and how people might want to support that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely my message, is that the only people that can solve this problem are us. Like,
Yes, yes,
you have to solve the problem for ourselves. Nobody's gonna come save us, nobody's gonna come swoop in, and the
yep,
challenges are immense, varied, complicated, nuanced, like
yep,
there's so much at stake that now is the time. If you care anything about the medicine, now is the time to rise up, because
yes,
if we don't, like, who's going to do the medicine? What frameworks are they going to be using? How are they going to deploy it? What kind of level of competency and expertise are they going to have? And how much are they going to give a shit about the medicine?
yep,
I think that, COVID was kind of a pinnacle moment in the world. Obviously, that shouldn't be something that's surprising to anybody to hear. I think that, the trust in our institutions was upended in that moment. I think that what happened
100%.
specifically with the vaccines made people ask questions they'd never asked before. And I think that, like you said, the demand for alternative medicine has never been higher. They're anticipating the market will grow to $1 trillion industry within the next 30 years. It's already in the tens of billions. And that is, it's like an 18% increase since pre COVID times. I think
Right.
that we also need to take into account the fact that this is a traumatized community because we've been broke for so long. That's real.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
yeah. And so the people that are starving, will
Mhm.
crawl across each other in order to get the last scrap of food. And we can't act that way. We need to support each other, whether that takes the
Yes.
form of financial support, emotional support, mental
Yep.
support. Like, we have to have places where we can air this shit out and get it out
Yes.
of our bodies, and we
Yes.
can have solutions to problems,
Yep.
whether it's funds for paying people's bill on downturns in their clinics, or it's advocacy in legislative bodies,
Yep.
advocacy on regulatory bodies. Like, all of
Yep.
those things need to come into account. The unfortunate thing for me, though, is that the plight of the student that has six-figure student loan debt has no, obvious way to pay those. There is a systemic flaw in the educational system that needs to be addressed and corrected. I just think that often what happens is an overcorrection where they could potentially tear down the whole funding of schools across the entire country for some period of time. But
Which
that
is
might have to
happening.
be. It's happening, and that might have to happen. I don't,
Hmm.
I know that some programs are getting absorbed by bigger universities and colleges, and who knows what that means. But we got to find hope. We got to find a place to start, and we have
Yeah.
to figure it out together. So, Lisa, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and having this conversation with me. I know that it's been kind of a heavy conversation, but I am you got fire in your belly, and that's obvious for anybody to see. And you definitely have a deeper understanding of all of these issues than a lot of people that I talk to. And so I think, your voice is an important one. So even if you're taking a pause, I hope that you keep fighting the fight, and that we'll see you around for sure. Yeah.
And I hope that people don't feel like this is heavy. What I'm hoping that people's takeaway is to hear that we still have a great opportunity right now in front of us. It requires us coming together. And that's why what we can do is support people like you, support people like Brian Crawford, support people like other practitioners who are out there doing the work. Come together. Let's start having those conversations, and let's make it happen, because the medicine will survive all of this.
Yeah.
That is not even a problem. It's been around for how long? It
Yeah.
it's gonna make it through. And so, it will take a while, and it doesn't happen quick, but The medicine is so strong and so powerful and so beautiful, and it just requires us showing up for it, and I don't know, maybe putting a reducing needle at liver 2 before we have a conversation and come to the table, and we can do it. We can do it.
Yeah, I was preparing for a webinar that I'm doing, and the whole message of the webinar is kind of unpacking the burden that practitioners all carry on their shoulders.
Yes.
And I was trying to have a conversation with AI and having it try to help me diagnose what conditions our practitioners have. And it's, you know, it's heart fire, it's
Yeah. Yep.
it's liver cheese
Yep.
stagnation, it's spleen dampness,
Yep.
it's the trifecta. You guys got the
Yes.
trifecta. And so we need to heal ourselves, and we need to
Yes.
heal our patients, and we need to
And it's never more on display than having this conversation about student loans because I really realized through that conversation how traumatized we really we really are. And
yeah,
so I appreciate you highlighting that aspect.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for being
Thank
here.
you.
I appreciate the conversation. Everybody out. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching.